What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Chris, this is 4K Motoring, and if it's your first time here, please feel free to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Consider becoming a member to support our projects. Only 99 cents a month would be greatly appreciated. Without further ado, let's start talking about the greatest motorcycle Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, screen mirroring device that I've tested to date. So this product is made by a company called Chigee. It's their AIO-5 Lite is what it's called. And this was sent to us at a really good time to try out because we have a couple other brands in the house that we're trying as well. So I've really gotten a feel for the market, for what these things are able to do and what specific models do that are really worthwhile to you, the consumer. To give you a very quick rundown on the specs of this thing, this is a 5-inch screen supporting wireless Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, and it works really well. Some of the other notable things is that it has a front and rear dash cam that is constantly recording, full dash cam mode. The rear one acts as a blind spot monitor, which I think is really cool, something I haven't seen in pretty much anything else. It's got a really nice wireless remote, Bluetooth remote, that downside has to be charged, but is really nice, really well made. Bracket is really easy to use. The full construction on this thing is pretty much the highest quality one that I've seen so far. There's carbon fiber on it, real carbon fiber. All the bracketry is all metal. It is really well made. And my favorite takeaway, there is a light sensor built into this thing. So if you're riding at night, this thing will automatically dim for you, which is huge. A lot of the cheaper models do not do that. So like all the other models, I want to go ahead and give you an unboxing experience. I want to show you what's inside the box here. You have the actual head unit itself. Like I said, it is really well made. It's got physical buttons on it. It's got the screen, the touch screen. There's carbon fiber on the back. The mounting hardware is really nice. Comes with a mount, handlebar mount. I really like the mounting hardware. It is a ball mount, but it is much smaller than the traditional RAM mount. It is all metal hardware. Everything is really well made. There are different spacers to go with the handlebars for different size handlebars. There are some little rubber grommets that act as vibration dampeners on the back of this. This thing is really well made. Front and rear dash cams are included and they are pretty decent. They stick out a little ways. They come with adhesive mounting and screw mounting, and they are adjustable for angle, so they do work really well even though they stick out a good bit. Overall, the quality I found to be pretty good. We'll review that a little bit later. There are TPMS sensors as well. They screw on here with a little lock nut to keep them steady, and there's a pairing procedure for that. They do work really well, although a little bit big and bulbous. Setting those aside, we do have some accessories included with this. It does include all the necessary wiring for the device, which is pretty cool. Has extensions, has the GPS sensor that is included for the speedometer, some of the other functions, has the power wire. We have another accessory box that's going to have our mount in it, as well as a couple extras. Those are some wire taps, some zip ties, some different handlebar spacers, a few accessories, and finally the handlebar mount itself. Pretty strong, although not my favorite. It works really well. All the tools needed to install are also included. So let's carry on into mounting and talk about how this thing gets installed on your bike. First and foremost, as we see on the back of this, you can very well see how the mounting hardware goes together. There's a ring mount here that has a certain spacer to go on the handlebar with 2 screws that tighten that down. There's then an arm that can be positioned in just about any direction, which comes over and clamps onto the ball mount that's on the back of this device. And then that lets you set your angle. Really, there's not many positions you can't put this thing in. It is pretty well infinitely adjustable, and overall, it is very sturdy. There are a bunch of wires that come out of the back of it just for the dash cams and the power. You can see how we have those routed here. That's probably going to be the most difficult part, finding where those wires go and make sure they're routed correctly. You're going to have these little connectors that screw together at certain points to make sure that everything works together, but they are well labeled. Cam F for front, cam R for rear. It is hard to mess these up. Once you find the best place to put these, you can go ahead and stick them down. I found the wires to actually be about perfect sizing to fit between the panel gaps on a lot of bikes, especially the Japanese ones. Worked really well on this MT-03. The power wire is a little bit different. It's going to have a black wire for negative, a red wire for power, and then a yellow wire. The yellow wire is going to hook to an accessory wire which means that it is always receiving some power, so it is keeping some of the, I guess, volatile memory stored on this device. Then when you turn the motorcycle on, the screen will appear, everything will engage, and it just works really well. I've had no issues with this. I've been very impressed, really and truly impressed by this system. Every bike's gonna be just a little bit different. With the MT-03, we were able to pop the seats off and the little cowl between the seats, very easily wire into the battery. For the positive and negative, that was no issue. And then the taillight circuit that goes back to the taillight, that's an ignition source that is easy to tap onto. That is one I usually recommend for low voltage stuff like this. You can also tap into the fuse panel if you find an ignition fuse, and that works great as well. Setup was pretty easy on this thing. It didn't require a whole lot of effort. And now every time we start it up, it has pretty quick response. See, the bike is ready, and there we go. It is already firing up. The screen is a little reflective, and I'd like to see maybe more of a matte coating, but overall it does pretty well. This is the screen we get even without connecting it to an Android Auto Apple CarPlay phone device. And we're getting our tire pressure right there, which seems pretty accurate. It's not exactly what my other tire pressure monitors are saying, but it's pretty close. We have our speedometer, we have an odometer there, general compass, and that is without even connecting your phone, which I think is pretty cool. After we connect the phone, we're gonna go ahead and get our typical Android Auto or Apple CarPlay setup, which is really easy to use. Overall, the resolution is actually really good. It is really easy to see things. Nothing seems blown out or anything, so I really like that. If we look at the video, we can see rear and front video. We can switch the cameras. There we go, there's the front. There's the rear, we got our tire pressure monitor, and we can see the zones that are in there. That's for your blind spot monitoring. So if something moves in these zones, it'll give you warnings on the screen, caution on either side to give you a blind spot monitoring just from a camera. I will say one thing we noted, we didn't mount the rear camera right in the center. We mounted a little bit off center, and I'll tell you this feature is gonna work a whole lot better if that camera is mounted right in the midline of your bike. So keep that in mind. On the top, we're gonna have our home button, which takes us back to our home screen, our center button, which is gonna start Android Auto, our camera button, which goes into our camera mode so we can see what's going on, and then a screen off, screen lock button, which is pretty cool. It gives you the option to do a couple different speedometers, a couple different views, gives you some voltages, altitudes. This is actually a really cool setup. I really like this a lot. And this screen is small enough that even on this small platform bike, this MT-03, from a rider position, you can very easily have this facing you so it's visible and still see your dashboard, and I really like that. So talking about the cameras, like I said, they do rotate, so once you get them stuck down, kind of in a forward space, you can kind of point them in the direction you want and tighten them down, and then the actual camera itself will rotate in this housing. This little top marker here should indicate straight up and down, and that should make sure that the camera feed is exactly perfect. Here I'll show you some examples of video. I'll show you the front camera. Overall, I think the quality is actually pretty good. The one thing I'll say is that there's no real stabilization in these. So mounted to the frame of your bike, every time you hit a bounce or if you're on a bumpy road, you can tell on the video, so there's that. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the quality. And I'll show you the video from the rear camera as well. I think it does a pretty good job catching everything from the back. This is probably gonna be your bouncier one, just from the geometry of the bikes itself. But overall, I think they did a pretty good job, and I think this is a very usable setup. The Bluetooth remote has a little bracket built into it that is easy to screw in. We're sharing the same mirror mount here that basically we shared with the heated grips. And it has a nice little mount, has a bunch of screw holes and sliders, so you can really get this at the perfect spot to be able to, from the handlebars, hit the buttons. There is a menu back button and an answer call button, an enter button and back button, and then a to the right button and hang up the phone button. This is Bluetooth, so it'll pair whenever you turn this thing on, but this is wireless, completely wireless. So there is USB Type-C charging on the end of that. GPS has to be mounted somewhere that's facing the sky, but otherwise doesn't really care, so we mounted that there. And I gotta say, I'm pretty impressed. We've tested another unit, and that video will be out soon for the Speedall Navicam. That one has a lot of the same similar features, works about the same. Overall different form factor, which is a little bit larger, but you don't really get a lot of screen real estate for that. So I'm kind of upset about that. You guys have seen this Carplay system that we've been using for months. And this thing is pretty popular on the internet. This is their W702. And overall, this is a pretty big screen, but it lacks any sort of camera systems, it lacks tire pressure monitoring, and no GPS, so it relies totally on your phone. But the one thing I have a problem with is this thing will not auto dim. There is no light sensor in this thing. The matte background, if you're in the car screen mirroring, Android Auto, something like that, always defaults to white to daytime. You have to switch it each and every time. And depending on what you do, that can be quite frustrating. One question I always get when I talk about these systems, no, this is not a standalone navigation system. This will not replace like a Garmin or something like that that runs completely on its own. It does rely on your phone for that aspect, but with the GPS, you at least get some of the metrics, some of the tire pressure monitoring. You'll always get the cameras, the blind spot monitoring is always there. The speedometer, stuff like that, that will work every time because this has its own built-in GPS, which is pretty cool. Overall, these things are pretty awesome. There's so many different brands out there that it's really hard to pick which one's for you. There's a bunch of different price points, but I can tell you those that are really cheap, like under $400 or $500, they don't have light sensors, they don't have a lot of these features, and in my experience, they're really not worth adding when you can just put your phone on a mount and put it in front of you. By far, this system is the best system I've used to date, and I'm very happy with it. Thank you, Chigee, for sending it to me. I have links to this device down below. If you guys have a different unit that you've tried that you think works really well, that has some of the same features or different features in addition to this, I'd love to hear about it. Just because this is such an emerging market, there are so many cool things out there, it is really awesome to test them. If you have any questions about this particular unit, leave them in the comments below. I'll try and answer as many as I can. I can usually answer most. Like I said, if you've not already hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, please do. Helps us out a lot. Consider becoming a member. 99 cents a month will help us bring you a lot more of this useful information. Fingers crossed. And as always, stay tuned. We'll be back with more.